You are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Real Impartation Moment on Tuesday Night Anatomy with Daniel Okwan. Today's section, we take a different dimension, regarding what we call developmental anatomy. My friends, over the past weeks, we've been looking at general embryology. And my friends, one important thing I want you to know is that general embryology generally ends around the 3rd week of intrauterine life. Now, beyond that, there's still developmental anatomy, and that is something we call systemic embryology. Now, my friends, I'm interested in teaching you that systemic embryology, but beginning with an important thing which is very important in forming some structures in the head and neck region. Yes, and that is something that we call pharyngeal apparatus. Pharyngeal apparatus. Yes. Now, this pharyngeal apparatus, the developmental process in human beings, yes, closely resembles virtually the same as what we find in the case of what we call fishes, because fishes will have something we call gills, and then also even these kind of juvenile amphibians by way of the tadpoles I'm talking about. Now, for this reason, what happens is that because gills in Greek, we call them branchiae. That is why this pharyngeal apparatus that I'm going to teach you can also be referred to as branchial apparatus. Branchial apparatus. Yes, that's one thing that we find. Now, it is so-called pharyngeal apparatus because, my friends, around the 4th week of intrauterine life period, we see these guys, lateral to what we call the developing pharynx. Now, there are certain things that I will teach you later so that you understand this concept better. Now, there's one thing that we will have to understand in the development of the gastrointestinal system. We have 3 areas: primitive tube, which will give rise to these guys, and this tube is what we call the gut tube. This gut tube is differentiated into 3. The foregut, the midgut, and the hindgut. My friends, I am interested in, of course, the foregut. Now, it is that foregut which gives rise to, of course, this pharynx I'm talking about. And so this pharynx over there, lateral to this pharynx, that is where we find the developing pharyngeal apparatus. Something we may also call pharyngeal arches. But usually when we talk about the arches, we are interested in the mesoderm of the arch. But my friends, this apparatus I'm talking about is not only, mesodermal, but it also has ectoderm and, of course, endoderm in addition. That is why I'm interested in telling you that pharyngeal apparatus. Yes, that's one thing I want you to know. Now, my friends, generally, one thing I want you to know is that there are 6 pharyngeal arches. 6 pharyngeal arches. But my friends, morphologically, physically, if you examine the developing embryo, you don't see 6 pharyngeal arches in the head and neck region. No, you don't see that. You see only the first 4. And my friends, they develop in craniocaudal direction from lateral to medial. So it means that from a lateral aspect, they come towards what we call the midline. We see all these swellings, in the head and neck, region. Yes, that's one thing that I want you to know. But I'm trying to tell you that morphologically, although I told you there are 6, morphologically we see 4 externally. Yes. And these 4 are the first 4 pharyngeal apparatus. So the question is, how about the other 2? The 5th and 6th ones, where are they? My friends, the 5th one, immediately it forms, it disappears. Yes, immediately it forms, it disappears. So usually we don't talk about that one. When you go to the 6th one, it doesn't show externally, so we don't see it. But it doesn't mean that it's not there. Sometimes some other authors may refer to it as rudimentary because we are not seeing it from the external aspect. So it's just like the human breast. For males, ours is rudimentary. It's not that substantial, except in some individuals. But in females, even if the person has put on that kind of attire, still, we can discern that, yes, there are breasts over there. That's what we see. That will be the case for the first 4 pharyngeal arches or apparatus. Okay, but the fifth and sixth, just like the male, we don't see it in there. Okay, so these are the things that we have to understand. So my friends, around the 4th week of intrauterine life, this is what I want you to know, that we will be having something of this sort. Let me guess, the topic we are doing today is what we call pharyngeal apparatus. Something I've told you that it is synonymous, okay, or we can use it interchangeably with this word we call bronchial, or this bronchial apparatus. Yes, so this is what we see. So the first thing is that around the region where we are having the bucopharyngeal membrane, okay, so assuming there's that kind of bucopharyngeal membrane over here, okay, and then from the foregut we will see what we call the pharynx around this area. So the pharynx will be here. Then let's say there's the bucopharyngeal membrane. Something we've resolved that it is also called oropharyngeal membrane over there. And then of course this area is of course the developing pharynx. Okay, that's what we see. It is this area where we are going to have this distant, okay, pharyngeal arch going to be lateral aspect over here. Now my friends, the key thing I want you to know is that at the time that we are going to see these arches developing, then what is going to happen is that this bucopharyngeal membrane will disappear, okay? It start disappearing, okay? It will disappear. So that at the end of the day, what we are going to see is that we will find these pharyngeal arches going to form towards the midline, okay? So that's what we are going to see. Okay, so exactly this is what we are going to see. Now, remember that they are bilateral. So one, we have one over here, and of course on the other side too we have another. Okay, so the same thing that I have here, I will replicate this. Yes, so that's what we have. Now my friends, one thing that I want you to be aware is that they are meeting, okay, in that cranial caudal, begin forming from the cranial region and they come in that caudal manner. Okay, these swellings meeting somewhere in the midline. Okay, so I told you from lateral to medial in this manner. Now this, if we look at the nomenclature, then what we are going to see is that this is what we call the first pharyngeal arch, just like what we have here. This is the second, the third, the fourth. Now I told you that the fifth one immediately it forms, it disappears. So there isn't much for us to talk about it, so it disappears. We don't have it. Okay, so the same thing over here. Now if you noticed, what we see is that from the external aspect, I use blue color to demonstrate that, and that represents, my friends, ectoderm. So the blue from the outside over here represent what we call ectoderm. So I want you to put down over here that over here, okay, we have the blue over here. Now this region represents the ectoderm. Okay, and then from the inside where I have red shown over here, that is what we call the endoderm. And so that one too, let's put it over here, that this one is the endoderm. Okay, let me show that over here. Endoderm. And my friends, the core, what is inside, okay, the core is going to be mesodermal in origin. So that's what I want you to be aware. Yes. So from ectoderm from the outside, endoderm inside, then the core, what is found inside, will be, of course, mesodermal. Now, one other thing that I want you to also be aware now, just now, is that this apparatus that I'm talking about, if I take just one, okay, what I will see is that you see that at a point, what we find is that the ectoderm, okay, the ectoderm, and of course the endoderm, they come very close together. So the regions where the ectoderm and the endoderm come very close together, so that there's, less amount, okay, of what we call the mesoderm in between them, that region is what we call pharyngeal membrane. So I want you to put that point 2 also down, that region over there will be called pharyngeal membrane. So my friends, at this point, from here to here, okay, is my pharyngeal membrane. Yes, my pharyngeal membrane, something I can call bronchial membrane. Now, one thing that we observe is that regions where they are meeting very close together, okay, on the, towards the external aspect, we are having ectoderm, towards the inner aspect, we are having endoderm. Now, my friends, these guys also give rise to some important structures, okay, which are worth recognizing, okay. So this groove from the external aspect is something we call clefts. Clefts. So it means from the groove from the external aspect, okay, that depression over there is what we call clefts. So my friends, over here we are having clefts, okay, clefts. So if you look at it, we are having the clefts, okay, from the outside. So if you can see over here, let's count the clefts. We have one over here. So there's the first cleft, second, third, and then of course the fourth cleft. Similar, the same thing for the opposite side. Yes. So it tells me that clefts are ectodermal. Clefts are derivatives of ectoderm. Clefts are ectodermal. Okay, so that's what we see. Now, if you look at it closely, all these, if you take each of these swellings, okay, what I have is that from the outside is covered by ectoderm, but from the inside is covered by endoderm, except the first apparatus. So the first apparatus, if you look at it closely, what you see is that even the portion which is supposed to be endodermal, substantial region, is covered by ectoderm. Now, that's a very important point I want you to know. That substantial region, which is supposed to be covered by endoderm, the red, is rather in blue. But it's not the case for these depressions in the region where we expect to be endodermal. Okay, these regions, the opposite aspects, rather we call them pouches. We call them pouches. So I want you to put that over there, that the opposite guys over here, okay, the depression where the ectoderm and the endoderm come close together, the depression created is what we call the pouch. So it means that pouches are endodermal. All the pouches are endodermal. I'm not talking about the arch, but what I'm trying to say is that the first arch, substantial portion, okay, of that region which is supposed to be covered by what you call endoderm is rather covered by ectoderm, but not for the pouches. For the pouches exclusively will be endodermal. That's what I want you to know. Yes, so exactly in this case. But in the case over here, now let's look at the pouches also. So we have one, 2, 3, and 4 pouches. That's what we see. Just like the clefts. My friends, in adults, if you look at your head and neck region from outside, you can see that there's one single opening over here. Yes. And that is what we call external acoustic meatus. External acoustic meatus. That's what we find over here. And that opening is coming from the first cleft that we see from outside. Yes. So it means that I am interested in this time the first cleft, not just any other cleft, the first cleft. Because my friends, the first cleft will be relevant in forming what we call the external. So the first cleft will give rise to what we call external acoustic meatus. Let me put it over here. External acoustic meatus, or you can say auditory canal. And not only that, it goes on to form the outer layer of the tympanic membrane. Now you know the eardrum is in there. Okay, the outer layer of the tympanum or the tympanic membrane, okay, will also arise from the external, from the what you call the first clefts. Okay, so together with, of course, the outer layer. Now let's put these points down. Outer layer of external of the what you call tympanic membrane. That's from the first cleft. So that's what we see over here. Now if you look at it, there's no any other cleft over there. There's no any other opening over there in the neck region, unless of course there's that kind of congenital abnormality. Okay, because the point is that, again, if you look at your head and neck region, you don't see any that kind of swellings around. Yes, there are no swellings, convolutions over here. Why? The reason is simple, because the point is that this first, okay, what we call the ectoderm of the second pharyngeal apparatus or the pharyngeal arch overgrows downwards. There's that kind of overgrowth. It overgrows downwards, and that's one thing that is worth acknowledging, that it overgrows downwards, okay, to cover the remaining ectodermal structures from outside them. Okay, that's what we see. So because of that overgrowth of the first downwards overgrowth of the second pharyngeal arch, its ectoderm going downwards, what we see is that there are no any other clefts from outside again. And my friends, this space that is trapped over here is something, because in the related to the neck region, we call it cervical sinus. So the name over here of that space that is trapped over here, okay, is what we call cervical sinus. So that's also worth noting, cervical sinus. That space over there. My friends, what happens is that this space gets obliterated. It got to, disappear from here. Yes, that's the normal case scenario. But there are some individuals, it persists. And that persistence of this cervical sinus in adults is something we call branchial cyst. Branchial cyst. Okay, so this, cervical sinus can persist, and it will lead to something we call branchial cyst. Already we said branchial has to do with the pharyngeal apparatus we are talking about. Okay, that's what we see. Yes. Now, my friends, in the case of the endodermal components, which you say they are called pouches. So it means whenever you hear pouches, they are endodermal. My friends, what will be the derivatives of these guys? And that is also worth knowing. It's very important that you become aware of it. Now, the first thing is this. If you look at this tympanic membrane, tympanic membrane, what I want you to know is that it is having all the three germ layers. It's having ectodermal, yes, from the first cleft, ectodermal, outer layer of the tympanic membrane. Then the intervening mesoderm between them, where this, ectoderm and of course endoderm have come very close together at the region of the pharyngeal membrane. We have what we call the middle layer of the tympanic membrane. It therefore tells me that the inner layer of the tympanic membrane should be coming from, of course, the endoderm over here. Okay, so it should be coming from the endoderm. So we are going to look at the pouches. Now I'm interested in the first pouch for now. So the first pouch that we are going to look at, the first pouch, pouch number 1, will give rise to what? So the first thing is that initially we form the structure. And this structure is what we call tubo-tympanic recess. So the first thing that is coming from the first, this pharyngeal pouch over here is something we call tubo-pharyngeal recess. tubopharyngeal recess. Now it is this tubopharyngeal recess that all the other derivatives will come out from. And what are these derivatives I'm talking about? The first thing I want you to know, let me put them over here. Let me use this blue to show, this black to show the derivatives coming from the tubopharyngeal recess. The first one is going to be, of course, the inner layer of course, the tympanic membrane. Okay, so the tympanic membrane here, I don't want to put it in 4 TM of tympanic membrane. And not only that, the lining epithelium of the middle ear cavity. My friends, that's what I want you to know. The lining epithelium of the middle ear cavity. So let's put that one down. Middle ear cavity. Yes, not only that. Now, if you look at the middle ear cavity, okay, what we see is that anteriorly we find what we call the eustachian tube. That's the eponym for, of course, the pharyngotympanic tube. Okay, so you see that there will be that pharyngotympanic tube, which is also known as the eustachian tube. Okay, so with the pharyngotympanic tube, yes, and even posteriorly, we have something called mastoid antrum. Now, mastoid antrum, okay, is an air-filled region, which is, in what we call the petrous part of the temporal bone, which also communicates with the mastoid air cells. Okay, now the mastoid antrum, even that one, is coming from, of course, this, first pharyngeal pouch. Okay, mastoid antrum. Yes. So these are the things which I want you to know will arise because they are in relation with, of course, the ear. So if you look at the ear, then you trace it over there, you find these things over there. Okay, so these are the derivatives I want you to be aware of. Now the next one is, of course, the second pouch. So pouch number 2, yes, pouch number 2 is pretty simple. It gives rise to the epithelial lining of what we call the palatine tonsil. Yes. So the epithelial lining of the palatine tonsil will be coming from, of course, the first, from the second pharyngeal pouch. So epithelial lining of palatine tonsil. Yes. Now, if you go to the third pouch, okay, so we are coming down. If you go to the third pouch, and of course, the fifth pouch, let me put that one to there. But there's some kind of paradox over here. Now, the point is that the third pouch gives rise to what we call the thymus, together with inferior parathyroid gland. Yeah, so let's put that point down. The third pouch will give rise to what we call the thymus, and then, of course, inferior parathyroid gland. And then we go to, of course, the fourth pouch. Now, my friends, the fourth pouch this time around will give rise to what we call superior parathyroid gland. Yes, this is where I want you to be aware of something. Yes, we are saying that these guys from cranial to caudal direction, that's how we form them. So the idea is that if you look at the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland, we see the 2 superior parathyroid glands, then 2 inferior parathyroid glands. Yes, so superior should be cranial, then inferior should be caudal. But interestingly, what we see is that during the development process, together with the thymus, okay, we have the inferior parathyroid gland formed in the third pouch, while of course the superior rather in the third pouch in the case of the inferior parathyroid Then in the fourth pouch, in the case of superior parathyroid gland, this is very crazy, my friends. The point is that, yeah, this is how, developmentally it begins. But what happens is that essentially this thymus will have to migrate, okay, towards what we call the, from the head and neck region, migrate towards what we call the anterior mediastinum. Yes. For this reason, what we will see is that it's going to migrate with its companion. And who is the companion? The inferior parathyroid gland. So it will migrate with it up to a lower level. So that at the end of the day, in the adults, we will see the superior parathyroid gland cranial to, of course, this inferior parathyroid gland. That's what we see. All right, good. So these are the things that we want you to know. You should be aware of these things, okay, critically. Now, the next thing that I want you to also be aware, yes, is that I told you that there was this kind of fifth arch which disappeared. Now we have remnants of it. Yes, remnant that was present, and that also gives us some kind of pouch. And that is what something we call ultimo branchial body, the last thing to be developed in this pharyngeal apparatus. That's why you are using the word ultimo. Ultimate is the last. So let's put that point to even around over here. So also in the same fourth pouch only, that's what we find it over there. Something we call ultimo branchial body. Okay, the last thing to develop over there, ultimo branchial body. Now, this ultimo branchial body, that is where, some people who teach these things following the older concepts, okay, they find it wrong. No. You find out last week also, I told you something, that some books will say ultimo branchial body will give rise to parafollicular C cells. But my friends, I've told you that no, rather the migratory cells, which are referred to as the fourth germ layer, by way of the neural crest cells, some of them will migrate into this ultimo branchial body, and from there, okay, we will form what we call parafollicular C cells. So rather, you can say that the ultimo branchial body is a site or the location for parafollicular cell, development. That's what you can say. Okay, not the one who is giving rise to it, because the one giving rise to it will be the neural crest cells. Okay, that's what we see. So my friends, these are the things that I want you to know. Now, the next thing, which is very important, okay, that we look at, okay, is what we call the mesenchymal derivatives coming from, of course, this pharyngeal apparatus we are talking about. And that is mainly what we call the pharyngeal arch. Okay, so the mesenchymal derivative, what is going to give rise to all these things. And that's the next thing that we are going to do, and we bring our class to a close. Okay, so that at the end of the day, you should be able to understand all these, things that we are talking about. Now, the point is that each of these arches, okay, will have a nerve supply. Okay, that's one thing that we have to know. Some of them are given some kind of special name. We have an arterial supply. We have some muscles which we are going to, come from these things. So in summary, they are all going to be within the mesenchyme, the mesoderm over there. And that's what we are going to look at. So we begin with the first pharyngeal arch. The first pharyngeal arch, what is going to be of it? So I'm looking at the mesoderm of the first pharyngeal arch. So the first pharyngeal arch, the first thing I want you to know is that it's also given another name. And the other name that is given to it is called mandibular arch. Mandibular arch. So the first arch is also called mandibular arch. So aka mandibular arch. Now, the next thing that we have to know about this first arch, I'm looking at the mesoderm, the mesenchyme over there. What is going to give rise to these things? Now, it is called mandibular arch, not for the reason, because I'll come to that one, not for the reason that it is supplied, or the derivatives from here are supplied by what we call the mandibular nerve. No, that's not the reason. But substantially, it forms what we call the mandible. So if you look at the mandible, one thing is that from what we call the ventral aspects of this first arch, the mesoderm over there, it gives rise to what we call the mandible. Yes. Because at the end of the day, from intramembranous ossification, that is where usually this mandible will be formed, except, of course, the most anterior region of this mandible. Because at the end of the day, we have the symphysis menti over here, where it's cartilaginous. So just the anterior region, most anterior region of this mandible, okay, will develop from cartilage. And that is why I want you to know that this arch, okay, will have a cartilage model. There will be a cartilage model that develops from it, so that some other structures which will have to develop via endochondral ossification can arise from it. And that is why the next thing that I want you to know is that its cartilage model is called Meckel's cartilage. Meckel's cartilage. Yes. Now, my friends, importantly, from this Meckel's cartilage, yes, we have some other structures. But before I go to that one, what are the derivatives? Mesenchymal derivatives, directly, not from this cartilage. The first one is that most portion of the mandible, okay, I told you from the ventral aspect of the mandible. But my friends, from the dorsal aspect of the mandible, of this first pharyngeal arch, the mesenchyme, we are going to form what we call the maxilla. So even the maxilla is coming from, of course, this mesenchyme of the first, pharyngeal apparatus. Yes. Okay. So what are some of the derivatives? Let's put those things down. So we will form what we call the mandible. Let me use different color. Let me use blue to show that. So we form mandible. We form maxilla. For those of you who have watched the video that I've done on the formation of the face and palate, I treated these things. Because from, of course, once we formed what we call maxilla, we also form the zygomatic bone. We also form what we call the squamous portion of the temporal bone. So let's put all these points down. So we will form what we call the zygomatic bone, squamous portion, temporal bone, and not only that, even including its styloid process. Now, if you are aware, from this squamous portion of temporal bone, you have the styloid process which extends downwards. So even the styloid process, yes, is coming from it. Styloid process of the temporal bone. Yes. But are we true? No. We are not true, because the point is that this cartilage model over here will give rise to certain things which are also going to arise from here, which will develop via endochondral ossification. And what are these guys I'm talking about? I am interested in telling you that from this cartilage model, okay, arising from it, we have two of what we call the middle ear bones, the ossicles. And you know the first two mixed bones, malleus and incus. So we have malleus and incus formed as well over here. But my friends, one thing is that the proximal aspect of the cartilage is the one who is giving rise to the malleus and incus. The remaining portion of the cartilage, yes, will have to give rise to some other ligament. And what ligament am I talking about? My friends, I'm talking about what we call the anterior ligaments of what we call malleus, anterior ligament of malleus. So I want you to put that one too over there, anterior ligament of malleus. And not only that, even the sphenomandibular ligament, sphenomandibular ligament. Now, if you look at it, all these structures, they are related, around over there. Yes, sphenomandibular ligament. Okay, that's one thing I want you to know. So that is for the first arch, the mesenchyme over there, what is giving rise to. Now, my friends, but the next thing that we have to know is that what is the arterial supply, blood supply? What is the arterial supply to this first pharyngeal arch? The mesenchyme, what is the arterial supply? And my friends, the arterial supply that I want you to be aware, okay, is what we call, this is not mandibular artery, no. It is maxillary artery, maxillary artery. So the artery going to supply this guy, okay, is what we call the maxillary artery. Maxillary artery, okay, is the one going to supply this first pharyngeal arch, okay, the mesenchyme over there. Now, having seen this, then the question is this: what is the nerve supply? Nerve supply. Now, there is something I have to explain over here, that there are two kinds of nerves. As far as the pharyngeal apparatus is concerned, there are two kinds of nerves that I want you to know. At the end of the day, when we ask you where are these nerves to the pharyngeal arches arising from, your answer is neural crest cells. Anything to the peripheral nervous system, neural crest cell, we already established that. There are two groups of nerves that I want you to know. One of them, where is the common thing that we are going to see, is what we call post-traumatic nerve. Post-traumatic nerve. Post-traumatic. So the nerve supply over here, which I am interested in you knowing, is what we call the post-traumatic nerve. Post-traumatic nerve. Now, the concept of post-traumatic nerve, there's another one, which you call a pre-traumatic nerve. In the case of the first arch only, it is that one which also, in addition to the post-traumatic nerve, we also have pre-traumatic nerve. So there's another one, pre-traumatic nerve. Now the point is that if the nerve supplying the mesenchyme, okay, going into the arch is cranial, going cranially to the level of the arch, then we say it is post-traumatic nerve. But when it's going caudal into the arch, then we call it pre-traumatic nerve. Now, most of these nerves to the pharyngeal arches, okay, will be post-traumatic. They will go cranial and not caudal. And my friends, the nerve which is going to, supply this one, okay, is something we call mandibular nerve. Already, I've hinted you on that. This is going to be mandibular nerve. And my friends, whenever we talk about mandibular nerve, we are talking about the third division of the trigeminal nerve, the fifth cranial nerve. That is why don't be surprised that you may see that we will write it as V3. So V3 for this guy, V3, the third division of the fifth nerve, where the trigeminal nerve, V3. But one thing is that during, one of the second video of orientation to anatomy that I taught you about some kind of hitchhiking of nerves. And my friends, the point is that there's that kind of concept I want you to be aware of. And the point is that this nerve, okay, important, the nerve which is coming from this mandibular nerve, a branch of it, which we are calling a lingual nerve, going to carry general sensation from the anterior to tertius of the tongue, okay, including the floor of the tongue, okay. When it is going, it is joined by another nerve, and that nerve is going to carry taste sensation from the anterior to tertius of the tongue, except that from the circumvallate papillae. We explain those things for you, and that guy is the chorda tympani. of course, when it goes there, it goes and supply, gives secretomotor fibers to, of course, also the submandibular gland and sublingual gland. But the point is that I am interested in telling you that because it joins, although it's a branch of the facial nerve, because it joins the lingual nerve to go to that destination, we also include it to be part of the pretraumatic, the nerve to the first arch, because it goes from caudal, okay, and joins it over there. So the pretraumatic nerve, okay, to, of course, the first pharyngeal arch, my friends, is what we call the cauda tympani branch. This time of the facial nerve, And my friends, whenever you talk about facial nerve, is the seventh cranial nerve. That's what we see. Now the point is that we have to, and I come to the most important thing I have to know about this first arch. One of the most important things I want you to know is that which muscles arise from the mesenchyme of the first pharyngeal arch. My friends, if you know the nerve that gives motor supply, because this one, it doesn't give motor supply to any muscle. Cauda tympani doesn't give. So you think about the post-traumatic nerve, the mandibular nerve. What muscles are supplied by mandibular? Now, once you know that, then my friends, you can tell the muscles arising from the mesenchyme of the first pharyngeal apparatus. Yes. And what are those things? One thing that everyone is aware is that when we talk about muscles of mastication, helping you to chew, they are muscles generally supplied by, of course, the mandibular nerve. It tells you that it means these muscles arise from mesenchyme of the first pharyngeal apparatus. Yes. So my friends, let's look at those muscles. We are going to put those things two down. What are those muscles? Okay, so importantly, what are those muscles coming out? Okay, so what are those muscles? And the first thing I want you to know is muscles of mastication. Muscles of mastication. And my friends, whenever you talk about muscles of mastication, you know there are just four. And these are, of course, what we call the medial pterygoid, the lateral pterygoid, masseter, and of course, temporaris muscle. Okay, so the pterygoids, medial and lateral pterygoids. Pterygoid muscles. Not only that, masseter muscle. And then, of course, the temporaris. I've seen that some people sometimes talk about, vaccinator. No. Vaccinator muscle is the trumpeter's muscle. It's a muscle which is, of course, one of the facial expression muscles. So it's not part of it. Okay? So, muscles of mastication, generally, that's what we see. Then, apart from that, what we know is that muscles of mastication. But is that the only one? No. My friends, I want you to know these ones also. The first thing that I want you to know, okay, is what we call the tensor veli. There are some two muscles with the name tensor. Tensor veli palatini, okay, one of the palate muscles, and tensor tympani, a middle ear muscle. They are also part of it, supplied by, of course, the the main trunk of what we call the mandibular nerve. So it's one thing that we have to look at. Tensor tympani, tensor veli palatini. Palatini, palate muscle, and of course tensor tympani. Yes. So these are those things I want you to be aware of. Yes. But is that all? No. There are two other muscles I want you to be aware of. Yes. And my friends, they are those muscles which form the diaphragm oris. Okay? Mainly one of them is what we call the one of them will be, of course, the anterior belly of the digastric muscle. Okay? That's one of them. So we look at anterior belly. digastric muscle, and then also the muscle which forms the diaphragm oris. Okay, the diaphragm oris, mylohyoid muscle. Okay, the muscle which forms the diaphragm oris. Okay, over there. So I want you to know about these guys. Now, it therefore tells me that all these guys will be muscles derived from, of course, the first Pharyngeal apparatus. Okay, so that's how we will learn these things. Okay, now the next one, okay, will be, of course, the second pharyngeal arch. Okay, so let's go to the second pharyngeal arch. The second pharyngeal arch. Now, my friends, the second pharyngeal arch is otherwise known as, so aka, we call it the hyoid arch. Hyoid arch. Hyoid arch. Now, my friends, the hyoid arch also has a cartilage model in there. And my friends, that cartilage model is called rickets cartilage. Rickets. Rickets cartilage. Okay, that's one thing I want you to know. Now, the point is that no, there's something that we have to change over here. Now, over here, don't add the styloid process to it. We take the styloid process because the styloid process rather be formed, of course, the first arch. Sorry, the second arch, the mesenchyme over there. Okay, the squamous part of the temporal bone, no problem. But its styloid process will be formed in the mesenchyme of the second pharyngeal apparatus. Okay, so that's what we see. Now, one thing that I want you to know, okay, will be that what are those things which are arising from, of course, this second pharyngeal arch. Now, the first thing that I want you to know is that the rickets cartilage, okay, will be relevant in giving rise to the last, of course, ear ossicle. So the missed bones, the S is stapes. Okay, so the stapes will arise from here. But my friends, there's an exception. Not the entire extent of the stapes will arise from, of course, this ricket cartilage of the second pharyngeal arch. Rather, we say the exception except its foot process. Its foot process. And also, there's another one which is, of course, the annular ligament. Annular ligament. So there's a ring-like ligament, okay, also around it of the foot process. Annular ligament, okay, of course, these steps. Okay, that's what we see. Why? Because these guys will be coming from something we call otic capsule. Now, these two, the reason is that the exception is that they will arise from what we call otic capsule. And my friends, otic capsule is ectodermal, very important in forming the inner ear. Okay, that's what we see. Now, what else? Even the styloid process, okay, as I told you, will be arising from this mesenchyme of the first pharyngeal arch. So let's look at other ones, okay? So we will have what we call the styloid process of course, the temporal bone. Not only that, we will form there's a ligament, which you call it stylohyoid ligament, okay? From the styloid process all the way to the hyoid bone, okay? So the stylohyoid ligament, okay? So from here, stylohyoid ligament. And my friends, this stylohyoid ligament goes all the way to the lesser cornua, okay, of the hyoid bone. Not the greater cornua, lesser cornua. Now remember, the greater cornua are more posteriorly oriented. The lesser cornua are a bit anterior, they raise, okay? Sorry, they are a bit, raised, forward, a bit superior. So that's where they go and attach. So we go to what we call the lesser cornua. And my friends, whenever we talk about lesser cornua of what we call the hyoid bone, So don't forget, we called it the hyoid arch of the hyoid bone. And my friends, the lesser conva is directly sitting on the body of the hyoid bone. Now the body of the hyoid bone is differentiated into two. We have the upper body of the hyoid bone and the lower body of the hyoid bone. The lower body of the hyoid bone is in line with, of course, the greater conva, while the upper body is in line with, of course, the lesser conva. That is why the upper body of the hyoid bone is also derived from the mesenchyme of the second pharyngeal arch. Okay, so that's what we see. Now, having seen this, then the next thing is, what is the artery supplying it? And my friends, for now, the artery I want you to know is called, what we call the, let me put the artery over here. We call it stapedial artery, okay? Later we understand these terms, stapedial and hyoid artery. Remnants of these arteries, okay, they are what we find over here. Stapedial and, of course, the hyoid artery. Then, when we are through with that, then the next thing is, what will be the muscles, okay, that will supply these things. I mean, that will be supplied. It means that these muscles, okay, will be arising from, of course, the mesenchyme of what we call the second pharyngeal arch. Okay, that's what we see. So for us to know the muscle, then the next thing is, what is the nerve supply? The post-traumatic nerve to, of course, the second pharyngeal arch. And my friends, your answer is, of course, the facial nerve. It's as simple as that. Your answer is the facial nerve. Okay, so think about the facial nerve. And facial nerve is the one I've told you is the seventh cranial nerve. So now, what are the muscles which will be supplied, okay, by, of course, the second? Now, if you are aware, one thing that comes into mind, very simple, is that whenever we talk about any muscle at all, or facial expression, any muscle at all, okay, these are grammaticals, major, minor, okay, vaccinator, risorius, whichever, any facial muscle, okay, I mean, the platysma, because at the end of the day, some people even segregate. So let's put it broadly, muscles of facial expression. Including platysma. Okay, some people want to segregate including platysma, including, of course, I mean, what we call occipitofrontalis muscle, okay, including the auricular muscles. Okay, all these are put over here. Any facial expression muscle at all. But my friends, in addition to the facial expression muscles, I want you to know that even the posterior belly, we told you that the anterior belly of digastric, okay, will be supplied by, of course, the mandibular nerve, but even the posterior belly of the digastric muscle will be supplied by this kind of, I mean, facial expression muscle. I mean, be supplied by, of course, the facial nerve. And who is that guy? Posterior belly of digastric, which also runs along with another, you know, that kind of muscle, which we call a stylohyoid muscle. Stylohyoid muscle. So put those ones down. Stylohyoid. And then, of course, the posterior, this time posterior belly of the digastric muscle. Okay, so that's what we see. Yes. So essentially, these are the things that I want you to be aware of. Now, how about the third arch? So follow these things closely. So we go to the third arch. Now, the third arch is not given another name. It's not having any other name. So the third arch is a third arch. Just unlike the first one, which we talked about, mandibular arch, and of course, the second arch being the hyoid arch. The third arch is just third arch. But my friends, one thing I want you to know is that there's also no special, I mean, colleague model in there. But rather, one thing I want you to know is that this arch will be important in form what we call the greater conva of the hyoid bone together with the lower body of the hyoid. So the derivatives we want you to know what we call greater corner of the hyoid bone together with the upper body of the hyoid bone. Yes, that's what we see. But my friends, one thing I want you to know is that regarding the nerve supply, the post-traumatic nerve, okay, that I want you to know, okay, will be, let me put that nerve for you. The nerve this time around is the ninth cranial nerve, something we call glossopharyngeal nerve. And that is, of course, the ninth cranial nerve. Cranial nerve 9. Okay, so that is what we see. Now, for us to know the muscle that will arise from here, from the mesenchyme over here, we just have to think about what muscle receives motor supply, okay, from glossopharyngeal nerve. And my friends, your answer is very simple. It's stylopharyngeal. There's a single muscle I want you to know. Stylopharyngeus. It's as simple as that. Stylopharyngeus. So the muscle from here will be stylopharyngeus. Stylopharyngeus muscle. Just a single muscle in the region of the pharynx. Yes, so that is what we see. Now, my friends, we go to what we call the fourth arch, and of course the sixth arch, and that's all for today. So let me just clean this portion over here and then look at the fourth and of course the sixth arch. And then we bring this class to a close. So we go to what we call the fourth arch. And my friends, the fourth arch also doesn't have any special name. So what will happen is that there's no cartilage to model in there. But one thing I want you to know is that, just to make it so simple for you, because in the books there are some kind of controversies, the fourth and then the sixth arches collectively will give rise to the laryngeal cartilages. Take it like that. The fourth and sixth arches will give rise to what we call the laryngeal cartilages. Okay, so everything over there, just take it like that. But my friends, the artery going to supply, now we need to know the artery going to supply what we call the third arch. Okay, so the third arch, my friends, the artery that I want you to know is what we call the common carotid artery. Let me put it, okay, very well. The artery is common carotid artery together with the internal carotid artery. Okay, so the artery, let me use the black to show. The artery going to supply this one will be, of course, common carotid artery. Together with, of course, internal carotid artery. So my friends, one thing that I want you to know is that the proximal portion of the common carotid artery, okay, of this arch will give rise to the proximal portion, and then this distal portion, okay, will form what we call the cranial portion, okay, continuation will give rise to the, of course, the internal carotid artery. So there are two arteries over here. I want you to know. Now, if you look at the fourth, what I want you to know, okay, is that, let me put the sixth one too over here so that it becomes very easy for us to compare. This one, the artery going to supply this one, the first one, is what we call the fourth arch. We are going to have what we call the arch of aorta. That is for the left side, the arch of aorta for the left side. But for the right, it's not going to be arch of aorta, my friends, it's going to be the right subclavian artery. So together with the right subclavian artery. But in the case of the cysts, rather, it's going to be by what we call, for the left, we have the left pulmonary artery. For the right, we have the right pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary artery, together, that is in the case of the left, we also have what we call the ductus arteriosus. And my friends, we are aware that this ductus arteriosus will become obliterated, okay, becoming that kind of ligamentum arteriosum. So just know that it's also part over there for the left side, okay, in intrauterine life period was playing that role. Now, then the question is, how about the nerve supply? Okay, what will be the post-traumatic nerve? Now, for both of them, they are coming from the 10th cranial nerve, and that's the vagus nerve. And so if you look at the vagus nerve, the cranial portion is rather getting the supply. The cranial portion, okay, is rather getting the supply through what we call the, yes, vagus nerve, but this time we are talking about the superior laryngeal nerve. Yes, is the vagus nerve. But in the case of the cyst arch, is by what we call the recurrent laryngeal nerve. It's still vagus. Okay, that's what we see, it's still vagus nerve. But one thing is that for us to understand which structures will come from here, yes, then there will be the need. Okay, then you should know which muscles are supplied by, of course, the superior laryngeal nerve. Remember that the superior laryngeal nerve, okay, divides into two. It divides, giving off, of course, the internal and, of course, external laryngeal nerve. Internal will not have any motor supply, just supply the mucosa, okay? But my friends, what happens is that the external is the one who is going to the external region. There's this muscle which habitually we see from the external aspect, okay? That muscle joining what you call the thyroid cartilage, the cricothyroid muscle. So for this reason, what happens is that the superior laryngeal nerve through the external laryngeal nerve will supply which muscle? It will supply what we call the cricothyroid muscle. Now that is where there are some kind of exceptions I want you to know. We are aware that recurrent laryngeal nerve will supply intrinsic muscles of the larynx. Although this cricothyroid is a muscle, intrinsic muscle of the larynx, it is not supplied by a recurrent laryngeal nerve. That's the exception we have to know. It means that unlike the other, intrinsic muscles of the larynx derived from the sixth pharyngeal arch, the mesenchyme, that of cricothyroid, although intrinsic muscle of the larynx, because of its nerve supply through the external branch of superior laryngeal nerve, it is rather derived from, of course, the fourth arch. Yes, so that is one thing I want you to know. And then when we come to the case of what we call the recurrent laryngeal nerve, the language becomes simple. You talk about intrinsic muscles of the larynx, supplied by, of course, intrinsic muscles of the larynx. Yes. But the exception, who is that exception? Except cricothyroid muscle. Except cricothyroid muscle. So except cricothyroid. Yes. That is what we see. But is that all? No. My friends, if you look at the pharynx, yes. The pharynx, the point is that the pharynx, we talk about what we call, the pharynx supply generated by what we call the pharyngeal plexus. And whenever we talk about pharyngeal plexus, we talk about the vago-accessory complex. So although it is a spinal accessory nerve supplying the muscles of the pharynx, they are doing so via the vagus nerve. Yes. That's the pharyngeal plexus. But my friends, even one muscle which belongs to the pharynx, which we call it the inferior constrictor muscle. Now, the inferior constrictor will have an attachment to the thyroid, cartilage, which we call it the thyroid pharyngeal muscle. Okay, thyroid bone to the thyroid pharyngeal, and then we also have the pharyngeal. The lower portion, where is the pharyngeal, is not getting supply from the vagal accessory complex. No, it is rather supplied by what we call this guy over here, which we call it the recurrent laryngeal nerve. So another point that I want you to know is that even this guy, which we call it the pharyngeal muscle, which is part of inferior constrictor muscle, which belongs to the pharyngeal muscles, is not supplied by, of course, the pharyngeal plexus, the vagal accessory complex. No, it's rather supplied, okay, by, of course, this recurrent laryngeal nerve. Okay, so that is one thing that I want you to know. Yes, so with this, okay, we've been able to talk about all these things that we have to know, okay, regarding, of course, all these, okay, guys. Now, my friends, if you also understand, okay, let me just tell you something. You also appreciate that, my friends, when we talk about palate, muscles of the palate, okay, together, of course, all these muscles of the pharynx I'm talking about, they are supplied through the vagal accessory complex, okay, via the vagus nerve. That's what we've established. Now, but one thing that I want you to know, okay, is that even the palate muscles, through the vagal accessory complex that I'm talking about, palate muscles, except, there's an exception. Now, if you remember, I told you something about, okay, the first arch. Now, the palate, I told you about tensor veli palatini, okay, supplied by, of course, the mandibular nerve, therefore belong to the first arch. So, although it's a palate muscle, it's supplied by the first arch. So, except the tensor veli palatini. Okay, so through this pharyngeal plexus I'm talking about, okay, the vagus nerve doing that supply. And then we also talk about muscles of the pharynx. Through this pharyngeal plexus, the vagus nerve contributing to it. Also an exception. Except, of course, I told you about one muscle, stylopharyngeus. So although the stylopharyngeus is a pharyngeal muscle, just like, of course, which I told you about the cricopharyngeal muscle, no, it's not supplied. But of course, this guy, which is, of course, which contributes to the pharyngeal plexus, no, it's not supplied by it, okay, but rather by what you call the third, pharyngeal arch, its nerve, by way of the glossopharyngeal nerve. So, my friends, pharynx except, so pharyngeal muscles, except, what are we talking about? Stylo, okay, pharyngeal muscle, stylopharyngeal muscle. Okay, so that is what we see. So, my friends, today we've been able to look at all that you need to be aware as far as the pharyngeal apparatus is concerned. We've looked at the 6 arches, which of course the fifth one disappears, forming from lateral to medial in the craniocaudal direction, giving rise to all these important head and neck structures. Okay, so I believe you find this meeting helpful. I'm very grateful for your time this evening. Have a good night, all of you, and may the good Lord richly bless you. Amen.